Welcome, football fans, to another edition of IDP Plus Bets. That is right, folks. We are less than 2 weeks away from the NFL football season. That is right. Look, about a week and a half, that Thursday, September 5th, we're going to be kicking off with some sweet football. But before we get to the real football action, we got to tell you about some of these awesome future bets, some of these props where you can still get some great value. Look, a couple weeks up to the season, I know it's fantasy football season. We're all getting into our drafts, but it's also time to make sure you get that value in the betting market before the season kicks off. Let's start beating the sports books before we even kick off. And I'm continuing with my division preview, my 4 best prop bets for each division. And we are in the AFC South. That is right, number 6 out of 8. We've done the NFC. We did the AFC East. And now we're on to the AFC South. And let's talk about this division real quick. The AFC South, a division with quite a number of question marks. This is a division that went from a bunch of teams that were really bad to now a bunch of teams who are up and coming. We've got a ton of young quarterbacks. I mean, Trevor Lawrence for the Jacksonville Jaguars is the oldest quarterback, and he's only entering in his 4th year. We've got 3 second-year quarterbacks looking to make the jump. Of course, that includes C.J. Stroud, who really doesn't need to make a huge jump. But can we see if he takes that next step, or does he hit that sophomore slump? So with young quarterbacks breeds a lot of variabilities, a lot of question marks, and that also breeds a lot of opportunity in the betting markets. So let's get right to it with my first favorite bet for the AFC South, and that is Mr. Calvin Ridley, newcomer to the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to be targeting his touchdown prop over 4.5 touchdowns. Now, Calvin Ridley entered the league, came into Atlanta, coming from the University of Alabama, automatically a stud. He was a high-round draft pick. He was a great prospect. And then, 2021, he hit a little bit of a snafu. As most of us D-gens and those that like to bet on the NFL know, he was also a fellow gambling man. So shout out to Calvin Ridley. But the key difference between him and us is he actually plays the game. So he cannot bet on NFL games. So that led to basically a 1.5 year long suspension. Now he's since returned. He played a season in Jacksonville for the rival, and then got traded to the rival Tennessee Titans. And I think he showed in his 1 season in Jacksonville that he still has it. He is still a relatively young player, and he still can be a dominant player. He's a guy who led them in touchdowns with 8 touchdowns, and excluding that 2021 season where he got busted for the gambling, only played 5 games. Every other season, he has gone over 7+ receiving touchdowns. So give me Calvin Ridley over 4.5 receiving touchdowns at -110, starting us off nice and easy with the -110 layup. Again, this is a Tennessee offense that is going through a little bit of a new era. They brought in a bunch of overhaul really through the whole team. Matt Vrabel is now out. Brian Callahan is now in. And also, I think a big one on the offense, Derrick Henry. He has been the staple for that offense for the past several years. The workhorse is gone. And now they really seem to be going all in on second-year quarterback Will Levis, surrounding him with pieces like Calvin Ridley, like Tyler Boyd, to go on with DeAndre Hopkins, some offensive linemen up front, Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears in the backfield. I think this is going to turn into a bit more of a pass-heavy offense. You can also project them to be down in some games. Again, I think Ridley can come into this team and has a shot at being the wide receiver 1, if not being a 1A, 1B with DeAndre Hopkins. I understand that this was a poor passing offense in the past, but I really think Ryan Tannehill limited them. I think, if anything, Will Levis is going to throw the ball downfield. Whether he's going to throw some interceptions or not, I think, he's a little bit of a gunslinger, but I do think that passing game is going to step forward, and I think Calvin Ridley is going to be someone who highly benefits from that. So give me Calvin Ridley over 4.5 touchdowns. Again, he's hit this in every season where he's played double-digit games. So really throw out the gambling season, and he's 100% on that. All right, from one wide receiver to another. We were just backing Calvin Ridley, and now we're immediately fading another receiver within the division, and that's rookie wide receiver Brian Thomas out of LSU, now on the Jacksonville Jaguars. First, let's take a second. Hey, both of their touchdown props are set at 4.5. I'm going to be going the under on Brian Thomas at +100. I think it's crazy that you have an NFL wide receiver, I would say a top 25 NFL wide receiver in Calvin Ridley, a proven guy. They set his touchdown prop at 4.5. And then you got a guy in Brian Thomas. I understand he was a first-round pick, but, he's got the same touchdown prop. That doesn't make any sense to me. And look, this Jacksonville offense, even though you could say it was better than Tennessee's, they only had one guy who went over this 4.5 receiving touchdown mark, and it was Calvin Ridley. And I don't think Brian Thomas is going to step in and be the number one option in Jacksonville. I see Christian Kirk in front of him. I see Evan Ingram set to have a lot of targets. And then, I think ETN in the backfield is the third receiving option. And then it's between him and Gabe Davis. You paid all this money for Gabe Davis. You obviously drafted Brian Thomas in the first round. So I really think, there's a bit of an argument whether he's the fourth or fifth option when it comes to the red zone, when it comes to the receiving threat. I know he's made some plays, in training camp in preseason. Again, how much can we gauge from that? We're playing against mostly backups there. So I think that people have a lot of high expectations for Brian Thomas, and it makes sense, right? He's a guy who had an incredible year last year, obviously over 1,000 receiving yards, but really the touchdowns kind of stood out. He had 15 touchdowns in the regular season. He had 2 in the postseason, so 17 touchdowns on the year. But when you look at his career, he's a guy who his first 2 years at LSU, pretty pedestrian, nothing crazy. I think he's a guy who really highly benefited from playing with the Heisman winner in Jaden Daniels and one of the best prospects we've seen in a while in wide receiver Malik Neighbors. I think the defenses had to focus a lot on those two guys, and Brian Thomas got to walk into some easy touchdown opportunities. I do not see that happening in Jacksonville the same way. So give me Brian Thomas under 4.5 receiving touchdowns at plus 100. All right, folks, we are halfway there. 2 out of 4 bets for the AFC South. And you know what that means? It is ad time. That is right, folks. Let me tell you about my friends over at Trophy Smack. I just talked about it. Only less than 2 weeks until NFL kickoff. So that means it's draft season. And if it's draft season, that means you need to check out Trophy Smack. Go ahead and head on over and get in the game right now with Trophy Smack's gorgeous draft boards, complete with player stickers so deep you couldn't possibly need them all. And for the first time, Trophy Smack has an IDP expansion pack for everybody like us who loves defense. If you're on the IDP Plus channel, we know you love real football. That means you love 11 on 11. Not just the offense, not just the defense. You love all football and the beautiful game that it is. All right, folks, we're jumping right back into it with my pick number 3 for the AFC South. And we're heading over to Houston. We're heading to the Houston Texans and another newcomer. So I've been betting on 3 newcomers. And the third is going to be running back Joe Mixon to be over 850.5 rushing yards at plus 100. Another plus money bet. We like that. Look, guys. Everybody's talking about the Houston Texans. Everybody's talking about how prolific they could be. Can they be a Super Bowl contender? They really surprised a lot of people last year, even though we did hit them to win the AFC South at a nice plus 450. So I hope you were following last year. But everybody's forgetting about Joe Mixon. He's a solid running back. Like, this team is going to run the ball. So if we're projecting them to be such a great team, and, again, you got Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, CJ Stroud. I get it. A prolific passing offense. But that means we're projecting them to be in the lead in a lot of games, a.k.a. wanting to run the ball, to salt away the game, to go ahead and protect that lead. And Joe Mixon is the guy who's proven he is more than capable of that, right? He went over 1,000 yards last season. And let's be honest, this Texans O-line is much improved than the Bengals O-line. Assuming they can stay healthy, which at this point in the season they all are, I think Joe Mixon sets up for a really nice year this year. Again, they're going to be playing from ahead, protecting that lead, running the ball. They're going to have a better offensive line than he had in Cincinnati. And it's DeMeco Ryans. Let's not forget, DeMeco Ryans played linebacker in the NFL. He's a defensive-minded head coach who loves to run the damn ball. And I think that's what he's going to do with Joe Mixon. I really, really like Joe Mixon in fantasy this year. I think everybody's forgetting about him, and so is Vegas. This number was even a little bit higher. It's come down. I see no reason for that. We've seen in the preseason, we all like Dameon Pierce. We think he runs hard. Look, he's a former Gator guy. I'm a Gator guy. But they hate Dameon Pierce for whatever reason. They don't want to give him the ball. So they were talking about Cam Akers off his second Achilles tear. They are going to ride Joe Mixon. He is the clear bona fide workhorse. And you talk about a guy, they had Devin Singletary last year, who's a decent back, but I think Joe Mixon is a clear step above in class. Devin Singletary cleared this number last year. So give me Joe Mixon over 850.5 rushing yards at plus 100. And now, folks, for the final bet here for number 4. And, of course, for the 4th bet, we are giving you the one with the best odds. And this is Michael Pittman Jr. to have the most receiving yards in the AFC South at a nice 4-1. That is plus 400. Of course, for the 4th bet, we got to go a little big here, right? So this Colts team, what are we going to see out of Anthony Richardson? What are we going to see out of Jonathan Taylor? What Jonathan Taylor are we going to get? How's the offensive line going to look? What's that defense? How's Shane Steichen going to be? A lot of question marks, but I think the one thing that is not a question mark is that Michael Pittman Jr. is the alpha in that wide receiver room. He is the guy who is going to get the lion's share of the targets, 25-30% of targets, and he's going to be able to produce, right? Now, I'm not only betting on Michael Pittman to have another great year. I mean, hey, even with Gardner Minshew, a backup quarterback, he had his career highs in reception and receiving yards just last season. Now you put in Anthony Richardson and, a guy who they drafted think highly of, who's got a cannon of an arm. Can he step that stake forward? And I get what you're saying. Hey, what if AR-15 gets hurt? Who they got backing him up? Mr. Joe Flacco. We saw him come off the couch last year for Cleveland, take them on a playoff run, and throw for over 300 yards in almost every game. By game, Joe Flacco was leading the NFL in yards per game. Jets, he came off the couch, and he can still do it. He can still move the ball downfield, and he would love a guy like Michael Pittman to throw to. So now, this bet is not only, hey, Michael Pittman to have a good year. This bet is also kind of a bet against the other wide receivers in that division. So let's quickly go through that, right? We talked about the Titans. Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins. Who's wide receiver one, right? They're definitely going to eat into each other's targets. I think they can both have a decent year, obviously with my Ridley over receiving touchdowns bet, but I don't think they can have a monster year because one of them is going to limit. Similar situation in Houston, but worse, right? You've got Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. 3 guys that are all going to be vying for C.J. Stroud's time. And by the way, Dalton Schultz, tight end, ain't bad himself, right? So again, I understand they'll likely throw for the most yards, but is someone really going to be able to separate? And then Jacksonville. Christian Kirk, a little bit more of a possession wide receiver. Evan Ingram, I really think is going to have a ton of targets this year. And again, is Brian Thomas, they're saying he's going to be the deep shot guy. Gabe Davis is notoriously your deep shot guy. I just think you got a lot of mouths to feed. Where in Indianapolis, there is clear one guy who is going to be the lead wide receiver, and that's Michael Pittman. Hands down, no questions asked. All right, folks, so that is it for us here. We have talked about my top 4 bets for the AFC South. We're going to quickly go through a recap here, and we're going to get out of here. So, kicked it off with Tennessee Titans wide receiver Calvin Ridley over 4.5 touchdowns at -110. Brian Thomas, the rookie from LSU, now on the Jacksonville Jaguars. We're taking him under 4.5 receiving touchdowns at +100. Then we have Joe Mixon, new Houston Texans running back, over 850 rush yards at +100. And then Michael Pittman Jr. to lead the AFC South in receiving yards at a nice, juicy 4-1. All right, folks, that is it for the AFC South bets. Again, I'm doing this for every division. Just did number 6 out of 8. So, of course, we obviously have the AFC West and the AFC North left to do. But check out those other bets if you haven't already. Obviously, they're also in article format if you prefer to read instead of watch this. Hey, IDP Plus bets. We are a new channel, as you can already tell. So any comments, subscribe, like, do all the good things. Hey, we're trying to make you money this NFL season and have some fun doing it. So we hope you join us here. And that is pretty much it, folks. So for the IDP Plus network, the doc is out of here.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.